Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for joining this morning's webinar. My name is David Robinson. I lead Motorola Solutions fixed video and analytics business in Europe, Middle East and Africa. I've got some very experienced and distinguished contributors to the webinar today. Motorola is delighted to be able to participate in this interesting discussion on how AI can help support public and passenger safety on the railway network. I should probably open with a slight explanation that many people on the web chat may be familiar with Motorola as a mobile phone company. That's nothing to do with us. Motorola Solutions, although we share a brand, focus entirely on supporting emergency services, public safety and enterprise customers such as utilities and transport with business critical and mission critical communications, of which video is obviously an important and increasingly important part. So that's me. I really appreciate everybody giving up an hour of their really valuable time this morning to participate in the webinar. We want to try and make it as conversational and as interactive as possible. So you'll notice that on the bottom of the screen, there's the ability to do a live Q&A and live chat, which I'll do my best to keep an eye on and keep up. But please feel free to post any contributions to that chat. And I'll try and intersperse the contributions from our panelists with those questions that you may have of them. So without any further ado, I'll go around the participants and give them the opportunity to introduce themselves properly. Andre.
Oh, thank you, David. Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Andre Pinto, and I'm the Fixed Video International Strategy and Sales Enablement Manager in Motorola Solutions. I am responsible for the portfolio strategy and also the go-to-market deliverables for the products and solutions that we sell in the international markets. I'm in the security video business since 2008, working in many transportation projects like railway, metro, and airports. So I'm glad to be here to share my experience with you and hopefully to answer to your questions. Over to you, Brad.
Thank you. Good morning. Brad Smith. I'm the head of public and passenger safety for Network Rail in the southern region. So in my role, I'm responsible for every interaction our public have with the railway system. So whether this be through a station, over a level crossing, or indeed on our trains around the infrastructure. That's me. Martin?
Morning. My name is Martin Freer. I'm the head of human factors at the MIMA group, and we are principally ergonomics human factors consultants, largely to Network Rail, actually.
Thanks very much, all. So I suppose I'll dive straight in with the first question to open up the discussion. I suppose, Brad, maybe to you first. What do you see as the current challenges for ensuring worker and passenger safety on the rail network?
Well, that's a huge question that we could probably spend a whole hour discussing. So it is. The network, as you imagine, is vast, hundreds of thousands of miles of infrastructure, all of which we have to make sure is safe for the passage of trains. To do that effectively requires a lot of manpower, requires a lot of resource, a lot of time, and also all of that comes at a risk. So putting people out there, walking our infrastructure, making sure that everything is as it should be, all the infrastructure is safe and vegetation hasn't overgrown, etc., comes at a risk. Sadly, we've seen fatalities of our workers at Network Rail or undertaking those sort of activities. So how do we keep everybody safe, all of our passengers safe, and making sure that the infrastructure is safe for use, but also reduce all of the risks to our workers? And that's where I think it's really interesting point of where our IA video technology could aid that, and onboard mounted train cameras, for example, is one of the features that we're looking at to remove track workers having to patrol those hundreds of miles, and what that technology could potentially bring us in benefits is it's the art of the possible at the moment.
Thanks, Brad. Are you able to give a little bit more background to any of the deployments of that kind of technology in those environments, whether they just be proof of concepts or trials or anything in a live scenario?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, at the moment, because this is untested waters to a certain extent, it is in the trial phases. However, we are currently trialing one project, as I mentioned, train-mounted cameras, CCTV with AI technology that is picking up any line-side assets. So looking at overgrown vegetation, if there's rubbish, ballast bags, scrap rail. Our line side is furnished with a lot of stuff, and trying to capture all of that in a data bank to allow our track workers to go out and respond to it is so much. So at the moment, we're trying to gather all of that data and cleverly filter through it to see what should and shouldn't be there, and if there's any, as I mentioned, vegetation overgrowing, what's our line side fencing looking like? Are there any gaps in it? And it's quite clever how it can pick up what the infrastructure should look like, and then quite quickly highlight that something is there that shouldn't be there, or isn't there and should be there.
Yeah. Thanks, Brad. And Andre, just from your experience internationally, are these similar themes to projects you've worked on, be it in the Middle East or the rest of Europe? Are they common challenges, common themes, or is there anything about what Brad has said that is unique, or something you've seen elsewhere which perhaps he hasn't mentioned?
No, absolutely. Yeah, I fully agree with what Brad said. I think nowadays, what customers are looking for, first of all, it's an open platform, which means that they can integrate multiple different systems like AI, license plate recognition or facial recognition from multiple vendors to optimize the operation itself, because we know that it's really complicated nowadays. We have to take in consideration that the railway security teams, they need to handle not only the platforms, but only depots. They need to cover railway track interactions, bridges, tunnels, a lot of different infrastructures. And without AI, it's really complicated to have a really focused team. So one of the things that we have seen recently, not recently, but on the past years, is the abandon of the old technology, like looking for abandoned luggage or abandoned object. Okay, because the amount of false alarms that these kind of old technologies are creating, it makes not reliable enough to use it on a daily basis. So customers are changing their minds to artificial intelligence search, meaning that they are looking for specific events and track the persons immediately. For example, lost child or a vehicle that appear in a particular area, and they want to look for the owner, or they are looking for the parent of that particular child. These kind of things are being used with these kind of searches, and forensic searches are being used recently in this kind of transportation. So we are moving from the old technologies, from like searching an object using just motion detection, for example, to AI-based events and platforms which are capable to identify a threat and informing the operator immediately.
Great, thanks, Andre, and thanks everybody. I can see that there's already questions coming in on the live chat, which is great. I promise I will get to them in a second, but just to come to Martin before I do, is there anything that you've heard so far from Brad or Andre, Martin, which stimulates any thoughts from a human factors perspective?
Well, yeah, I mean, the kinds of applications they're talking about, I think, are very useful, and particularly in trying to manage where there's lots of data, where it's difficult for people to go, being line side, up at height. I noticed someone's mentioned, use of a drone. These are all excellent opportunities for supporting workflow, for automating and assisting operations to deal with, growing, a vastly growing amount of data and information. Not now, but I do have a number of reservations about AI, and that's why human factors is interesting, because I think it has to be thought of and work as an assistive technology, rather than a replacement for humans. And my overall feeling is most systems that I've come across not ready to be making decisions for humans. But with that small caveat, I think there's lots and I think everything people have said so far makes a lot of sense and could bring a lot of benefits, particularly in terms of reducing workload, spotting things that otherwise there just isn't time and capacity to spot.
Yeah. Thanks, Martin. Yeah, you raise an interesting point around the efficacy of the technology, and we have a concept of the human in the loop. So the technology isn't necessarily there to replace human thinking, but to perhaps remove some of the mundane, predictable tasks, so that you can present a practitioner with useful intelligence on which they can then act and use their discretion, as opposed to replace them in the process. That's interesting. That's your perspective as well. And again, is that the same internationally, Andre? Do you see that as a common theme? Clearly we're talking about public and passenger safety, and it's, I imagine, the same the world over. Are any other organisations that you've worked with taking that step of replacing the human in the loop in the process, or is that still very much anchored in deployments globally?
No, I fully agree with what Martin said. In fact, we know that our customers are always struggling with the human operation, the amount of resources they can handle, because we know the budgets are always shrinking every single year. So this is really a common issue. However, I think nowadays technology can fully support this kind of operations. Not 100% automated. We are not in that particular line of sight, but we need to have technology, artificial intelligence, devices, platforms supporting the human operation in a way that we have specialized persons or specialized personnel just deciding what do they have to do, and not understanding what is happening on the or inside of their infrastructure, like platforms, for example. So I think this is a combination between high responsibility from the personnel, but also a huge amount of support from technology.
Yeah. Thanks, Andre. And Brad, I suppose same question to number 3.
Yeah, so no, I fully agree, and it's something that we're thinking about at the moment. Is gathering all data is a brilliant thing, and it allows us to know how our infrastructure is at any given moment. However, it absolutely doesn't replace an engineer going to fix a problem. So identifying all of these problems is a wonderful thing, but if we haven't got the resources to go and deploy engineers to site, it doesn't replace a competent engineer and all of the tools with just identifying it. So that's a bit of a resource challenge that we're having a conversation about at the moment. Is we're learning all of this new stuff, which is amazing. We're gathering more data than we ever have previously. But what we do with it and having the resources to go out and actually deal with it is a different circumstances that AI isn't going to be able to assist us with, because it's not going to fix the problem. It might just be better at finding the problem for us.
Yeah, and perhaps generating latent demand that you can't then respond to.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm doing a terrible job of trying to keep up with the questions here, so apologies for that. But please do keep contributing. There was a question which is starting to disappear, so I'll get to it quickly, around the use of drone for visual track situations and track inspections. Brad, is drone technology something that Network Rail has explored?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is. So at the moment, we've got concurrent technology work streams ongoing, which drones features a large part of it. It comes with its own restrictions around flight paths and making sure that you do it properly. It's not just going to be somebody putting up a drone that the got for Christmas, for example. It's going through the proper process and making sure all of our pilots are competent, etc. So we're going through that at the moment, and part of that we're trialing going through plane lines, so having a look at our track assets as well as our line side boundary fencing. So that is something that's going on concurrent to our train mounted cameras, as well as some other cameras at CCTVs and stations, for example. Yeah, we're having a look at that, but again, it comes with the same limitations as it's still restrictive in terms of we need the pilots, we need the flight plans, we need to make sure it's all planned in advance, and also we need to make sure we're not causing distractions to our train drivers either, having a drone flying ahead and all of the different ergonomic issues that comes with that. And once we have the data, so what, we need the resource to go and send to site.
Yeah. And I presume when you talk about the kind of normal limitations, that things like beyond visual line of sight, so I'm presuming that you're subject to the same restrictions of the pilot having been able to maintain eye contact with the drone, so you could do a pre-configured flight path to allow a drone to self-fly for 30 or 40 miles and back again to inspect the track.
Yeah, spot on. Yeah, it's working with all of those restrictions, and still it's better than sending people out to a potential dangerous environment, but it comes with its own restrictions as well.
Yeah, great. I'll have to move quicker. So one question, and I think you touched upon it a moment ago, Brad, in terms of train-mounted cameras. So one of the questions for Manti on the chat was how effective the solution is, in its ability to process the AI in real time at the edge if it's on a moving train. I don't know how reliable that you found that. I don't know, Andre, we've talked about this quite a bit in the past as well with customers who've asked for similar type of technologies, which has been quite difficult to deploy.
Yeah, it is. Again, it's one of the downsides of it. It's better than nothing, but it isn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination. I feel once the technology catches up with how quickly this is happened. So 2 years ago we weren't really having a look at this. Now all of a sudden we're doing tram-mated drones, CCTV at level crossings, everything. I only feel in the next sort of 12 to 18 months, that's why I'm so excited about it, is because it's happening so fast. The technology is improving so quickly. At the moment, it's not perfect, but with great minds working on it, it looks positive in the future.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Brad. And sorry, before I come to Andre to talk about any experience you have with AI or moving trains, which is a very specific question. Martin, given Brad's comment about technology moving so quick, how great or an opportunity, or indeed a risk, is the adoption of technology and people's ability to adapt and keep up and train and absorb the change?
Actually, it's very difficult. The technology, the speed with which it's changing and the speed of capability is phenomenal, and the opportunities are phenomenal, and the things that AI can do, or are purported to be able to do, should we say? It's almost, in a sense, it's kind of limitless. The ability of users to keep up, or operators to keep up with that is clearly, I mean, as Brad's been saying, that it presents a whole load of new challenges. How do you know that the data you're feeding is actually correct, or how do you maintain its integrity? How do you maintain its security? And the same with the AI algorithm, as well as the supportive data. How do you know it's not missing stuff? And there are a whole load of problems that humans have with any kind of automation, AI just being one type. And the obvious one that I'm sure most people are aware of is an automation bias, if you like. So people start to believe in the machine, they become skilled and less expert themselves, and everyone trusts in the machine. And of course, if the machine gets it wrong, there's a big question. Well, there's legal issues with the operators. Did they make the mistake, or did the machine make the mistake? So there's and there's training, and I think the biggest issue I see with all kinds of automation is whether and the operators can communicate meaningfully with each other, so that people can understand the system, so that they can trust the system, and so that they can help the system learn. So yeah, there are many positives, but there are some things to be really careful about.
Yeah. And Andre, from your perspective, are those similar themes you've seen elsewhere, and how the projects that you've worked on dealt with that? So data integrity, people's trust in the system, I guess, and its dependency.
No, yeah, absolutely. I think nowadays it's one of the biggest concerns, the data privacy, how systems can register the databases, who can access to the system. All those questions are nowadays on top of the table. I think the industry in general can address these issues quite well, and customers can feel really secure. Regarding, I would like to address the onboarding cameras as well, the onboarding systems from your previous question. I think that nowadays, and honestly, we have to divide these into sections. The section of old deployment, those old lines, old systems that we still have. Okay, those deployments, the onboarding systems, perhaps they do not work as it should, because we rely on old communication technology. Okay, so we struggled in a few projects back in probably 2 or 3 years ago, a renovation project where we are adding our technology, for example, and we found a lot of limitations across the network, which means that the communication between the trains and the central headquarters, for example, or platforms, they were not reliable enough to keep the video communication always on. So for those kind of environments, we still have to rely on, the typical onboarding server plus cameras, and everything is processed locally. Then, of course, with let's say a more or less reliable communication, we can access to those recorders from the operation control room. And because the artificial intelligence is based on metadata, it's quite easy to search in, let's say, in a live environment. If we need to search for someone now, it is possible because we are just searching for metadata. We are sending data, not exactly video, which not overload the network. However, if we go to the new projects, to this new perspective of 5G communication, it's quite easy to have only the cameras on boarding, and all the, let's say, forensic searches, artificial intelligence capabilities can be processed remotely without any kind of issue. I would like to also mention that, generally speaking, all the new cameras, they have artificial intelligence embedded, which means that the camera itself can classify objects, can classify if there is a person, if it's a vehicle, extract metadata from those objects, like the color of the hair, the gender, these kind of things can be extracted by the camera itself, and then those metadata can be extrapolated to a centralized location and can be worked by artificial intelligence, let's say, enabling and optimizing the searches for these particular events. So I think we have two perspectives to work. Of course, then we have to say, one thing is to have, let's say, a municipality metro line, which the network is more or less stable. Another thing is a countryside rail. And those kind of different projects may require different approaches, different technologies, to guarantee that we always have a reliable communication. I have to say that on a recent project that we are working on, the communication company is ensuring us 1 gig connection effective on the trains. Okay, so which means that it's more than enough for any CCTV system along the train with artificial intelligence or all those new capabilities.
Thanks, Andre. And actually comes to a question that I think I'm now struggling to find, that Emilio asked in the chat about how the data is being transferred. So I think what you were saying was that historically it may be processed locally because there wasn't the connectivity. It improved with 4G, but with 5G, it opens up a new range of possibility of using edge technology on the cameras to do backhaul of the metadata. Is that a fair conclusion?
Yeah, absolutely. And also we are seeing as well, not only 5G, but also private communications between trains and stations, really reliable with a high throughput. So we are covered in that sense.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Andre. And a question, I suppose, a very specific question, Brad, which I saw. So, question from Dr. Nigel Bish on the chat around Network Rail having tested AI as a tool to detect trespass on the track some years ago, and what happened to that. Is that something that you're familiar with?
So I'm not familiar with the exact project, but I am aware that it's been a sort of working concept for some time. However, not to the point where we can rely on it. So given what we've already discussed, some of the restrictions about it, and it's our infrastructure, I think I mentioned before, it's so vast and it's reliant on cameras being able to see. So without installing cameras on every single section of the railway, without knowing exactly every inch of the possibility, it was quite hard to detect it. It's only as good as if a train goes through that area, but if a train isn't passing through quite regularly, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, thanks. And from Network Rail's perspective, Brad, what organisations may you have a responsibility to share any information with, and how difficult is that? I'm thinking maybe with the police or train operating companies. Once the the data is collected within Network Rail, what might you have to do with it?
Yeah, well, so it all depends what we're talking about, isn't it? So if we have a security threat, or we have an ongoing trespass incident, and we've identified that we have a reoccurring trespasser, then absolutely we work with our colleagues in British Transport Police, and also we'll work with our local councils, or potentially mental health clinics, or anything we can do to work with our partners across the industry to help. Also, if it affects the operational railway, then absolutely we work with our train operating colleagues as well. And anything on the live infrastructure is always being discussed with frontline operational, be it our signallers or drivers, if it has an immediate impact to the risk of the infrastructure.
Yeah. Thanks. And there's a few questions, and I wanted to explore also the theme of legitimacy and adoption of AI on the technology. I suppose both from a staff point of view as well as from a travelling public point of view. We work with a lot of projects in law enforcement where the barriers to legitimacy are quite high. People have understandable questions and challenges around AI, its ability to learn, bias, so on and so forth. Do you have similar conversations within Network Rail from staff, the travelling public, what the technology does, what it's capturing, how it's stored, or those themes that aren't necessarily mature in this sector?
So it's all quite hypothetical at the moment. So those conversations are starting to be had as we look to adopt more and more and explore what we could do. But as we're not at the stage of rolling this out in its entirety, those conversations are quite at the early stages, I would say.
Yeah. And Martin, do you have a view and perspective on that?
Well, I do. As you might imagine, I think all of these systems have to be designed and developed from a human-centered perspective, which is not surprising. I'm a human-centered person. And I think the key is actually to get it right is to make sure that the capabilities, needs of the humans in the system are considered right from the very beginning at all stages. So, whether that's research, development, education, training, policy, ethics, the legal aspects, and that's before you start actually trying to develop code or software. And I think, as we've said, it starts at defining the problem. What are the goals for the system? What are the tasks we're trying to improve, and how are we going to improve them? The data, where does it come from? How do you collect it, monitor it, update, check its integrity, annotate it? It needs to be accurate, complete, fair. There's privacy issues, there's security issues. I noticed someone's mentioned about cyber security. The data and even the algorithm are areas where either, well, should we say, inappropriate or even malicious interference, could get in the way. It's got to be really important to Network Rail's operation. And then I think, the AI itself, or the algorithm, it's got to be safe, reliable. People have mentioned already the bias and historical bias that can creep in because your sample data is from limited sites, or historical bias and things like that can come in. Is it secure? Can it be manipulated? And ultimately, although I think we're largely talking about assistive technology, it occurred to me, as Brad was saying, actually there's a load of data, and then our AI process helps us sift through that data, but presents us big problems with responding to it and carrying out maintenance or whatever it is. The natural tendency, of course, will be to use AI to start helping us make some decisions and prioritizing. And so they're an interesting kind of decision in that AI is not actually doing something like flying the airplane or driving the train, but it's making actually quite important decisions when you start to say, well, to help me balance all of this mass of choices I've got, I'll help. The pressure will be, let's use AI to help us make some of those decisions. And there's a whole load of human factors issues buried in there about, well, the same as we've talked about: reliance, bias, trust. So yeah,
that's fine. Yeah, and to continue that theme, Andre, it's probably one for you. There's a question around how quickly AI can learn new things, and can it adapt quickly enough to rapidly evolving trends and technology. So it's a question for you: how effective are the systems at learning an environment? So hypothetically, it may be a bad example, I don't know. If a camera is trained on a level crossing and learns over time what normal behavior is at that environment, how quickly would it adapt if the environment changed and what was normal became less normal, if that makes sense?
Yeah, nowadays it's in a couple of days. Well, depending on the environment, of course. That if we are talking about, let's say, a really crowded, let's say, train station, it's in a matter of hours. The concept, or let's say how it works, is always, as long as you have a lot of movement, the learning cycle will be faster, which means that it can go from a couple of hours to, let's say, 2 or 3 days. Let's say that, generally speaking, currently all the cameras with artificial intelligence embedded, they can learn the scene in a couple of minutes. Okay, so as long as you install the camera will start analyzing the scene and will be able to classify, let's say, all the objects, understand the behavior, understanding the let's say the current let's say the real activity of the scene, and address and target those known common behaviors. Mainly because we passed from the old technology that the artificial intelligence was using before, like understanding the object, how the object moves, to try to understand if it's a person, if it's a vehicle, which takes a lot of steps across the camera. Nowadays, with the neural networks inside of each camera, the camera knows exactly what an object looks like our eyes, like we see an object and we clearly understand and classify the object in milliseconds, right? So the cameras nowadays works as our eyes. So it's quite fast. They are quite accurate to classify those objects. And then artificial intelligence, it is used only to support the operations. Then, let's say 80% of the cases, artificial intelligence is supporting the security operation. However, operation, let's say maintenance, this kind of more technical areas can be also supported by artificial intelligence, but they still rely on a lot of human interaction and a lot of human analysis. So I think this is a way that, or let's say a road that we have to go on the upcoming years. But currently, artificial intelligence is mainly supporting security activities.
Right. Okay. Fascinating in itself, and I suppose we can explore that a bit further, Brad. Beyond security, what are the kind of the main themes or main priorities of an organisation like Network Rail and adoption of technology? And I'm coming to some of the thinking. So we've talked about potential maintenance, security, but things like occupancy counting, to understand how the public are using the rail environment in terms of demand for resources, cycle capacity, as well as perhaps facilities for less well-abled people. Are those themes being explored as well, or is it predominantly about public passenger safety and maintenance?
Yeah, so it's wide open at the moment, I think, is the answer. So we're having a look where we can utilize this technology. Primarily, I suppose, in my world, we're having a look at where we could improve public and passenger safety, as obviously, quite selfishly, that's what I care about. So the level crossings we mentioned, that's huge. So as you would expect, we inspect and we risk assess every level crossing we have on our infrastructure to understand the risks, what type of users go across that level crossing, if there's any vulnerable users, how many are there, are they young, old, or to understand the demographic, to make sure that we have suitable mitigation on that specific level crossing. And all of those assessments feed into our business strategy, so where we spend our money. If we have a really high risk level crossing that we know is really well used and it has vulnerable users, we would invest in that level crossing to make sure we upgrade it or eliminate the risk and look to close it. But that's only as good as the intelligence we have by going out and at the moment installing a bog standard camera, if you will, over a period of time to gain that census, and then it's reliant on somebody watching hours of footage, counting the users, making sure that they capture all of that data. To install a permanent or a semi-permanent AI camera, to have that feed is only going to improve our data capturing, which will then improve our business strategy of where we invest our money and making sure we know what confirms what we know, or if it doesn't confirm, where our risk is across the level crossings. And then it gets really exciting. So I was speaking with a level crossing manager up north last week around how quickly would it be able to learn for that live feedback. So at the moment, some of our high-risk substations that obviously pose an electrical risk to public have got cameras installed, and if it detects somebody, it gives an audible alarm. Now, for that real-life time feedback, and I'm sure there's a load of issues that will need to be worked through on it, but in talking about the art of the possible, if that happened at some of our high risk level crossings where it detected a user not using the crossing as it was designed to be used, and gave that real life or audible warning or something, use the level crossing correctly or whatever that might be, would change the behavior of the user, and how quickly that we could improve our safety by changing that behavior on that audible warning.
Yeah, great. And what challenge did you have, Brad, in terms of, I imagine, and I'm guessing here, I imagine there's investment requirement for any adoption of any of these new technologies that may then fix failure demand, so further down the line. So there may be a return on investment, but it's quite difficult to you're asking for money up front. How difficult is that trade-off and that balance to strike?
So with Network Rail, we base all of our safety improvement schemes off risk reduction. So in terms of return on investment, we're not looking at on return on investment. We were looking at we risk rank a part of our infrastructure, and then that builds towards our business case to reduce that risk. The upfront cost is proportionate to how much risk we reduce. So if I was able to go back to the business and say, I can reduce our corporate or legal risk and our moral risk of making sure all of our infrastructure is safe by X amount, the upfront capital will be proportionate to whatever I could reduce that risk by. By using this technology, I could potentially reduce the risk greater, improving the upfront capital that I'll be able to receive.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you very much. I suppose a question for all all of the participants. What do you think are the barriers, the main barriers to adoption of this technology of AI on the rail network? Andre, what do you think in terms of your experience elsewhere outside the UK?
Well, in fact, what we see recently is that there are no much barriers. Of course, in Europe, we always have the GDPR issues. So facial recognition is an issue at the moment. We do see a lot of rail operators or rail management customers with some concerns about how can they use facial recognition to optimize the security. Not, of course, not because of the, let's say, the risks of false alarms, but mainly to understand the legal component. If it's fully legal, which kind of risks are we taking with the facial recognition? So I think that, globally speaking, all the CCTV manufacturers, they can address these in a way that the data or the privacy data from each individual will be kept, let's say, in secret. So when we are using facial recognition, we are not extracting the data from your ID card. We are not addressing names to the faces. So what we are looking is for similarities, and I think that this is the barrier that we need to transpound. So clearly, we need to understand that facial recognition is a really helpful tool that allows us to control the environment. We know that, and we speak a lot with security teams across this vertical. And they know exactly who are the persons that usually they go and they usually attack, or they go for robbery, they go for this pickpocketing, this kind of small thefts. Security teams, they know all of them. So it's a matter of understand if those individuals are entering in one specific platform, and how can we help our customers, our passengers, to be more aware of these threats. So facial recognition is quite helpful in this particular case. However, we still need to share more knowledge, to share more detailed information across the rail operators to make it clear how can we be GDPR compliant, how can we keep privacy secure, how can we ensure that the data from our passengers can be kept secure and not extracting information that we don't need to operate security. So I think this is the most common issue. Artificial intelligence itself, the way that systems can or are able to classify objects or persons, vehicles, identify if it's a person or not. This kind of things, they are not a threat, and they are commonly used across the world. So I think that's the two big points that we need to address now.
Okay, thanks, Andre. Would you agree with that, Martin, or would you have a different perspective?
I think you're mute, Martin.
Sorry. I'm sorry about that. I think I agree totally. I think there are a number of other barriers that probably need to be addressed, and one of those, obviously, is the operators and users themselves, and general perception of AI as a job stealer or a job replacer, and so to not just in this particular, any kind of automation can be seen in that way, which I think needs to be overcome by user engagement, user involvement, training, collaboration in the design and development of the system itself, again, right from the early stages. But it's something you often see with with automation, although it's not AI, network rails never really got the benefits that they were expecting from automatic route setting, for example. You know, and Brad will probably know, but I think a lot of that is to do with, you know, lack of development. Sorry, lack of involvement in the development. You know, not brilliant training, all those sorts of things. So, overcoming that, what's the word? Sort of cultural inertia is getting it accepted, so that people actually get a benefit. I think, you know, it is really important, making sure that that you get the value for the money.
Yeah.
David, if you allow me, I would like to just to add one point to what Martin said, which I fully agree. I think that we have to make clear that artificial intelligence is not, or it was not developed to replace people. Okay, it was developed to optimize and to enhance the performance of those that already work in the security business, for example. So let me give you just a short two examples about how it works, and you know more than me for sure. The security personnel, they are not, for example, when they are controlling a network, they are not only looking to the cameras, not looking if there is any suspicious activity. They are taking phone calls. They are providing access to many contractors to the facilities. They are doing multiple different tests simultaneously. So the amount of time and effort that they have to put on surveillance, it's more and more reduced, which means that they really need to have, let's say, an assistive technology, something that can help them to respond immediately to a specific threat that is happening and they are not aware of it. So this is the big key point of artificial intelligence addressed to security in railway operation. And then, of course, there is always the human intervention. Security or artificial intelligence applied to the security is not, let's say, 100% independent, meaning there is always the human intervention, always someone that has to say, okay, this is a threat, we need to follow the guidelines to solve this issue, or this is a false alarm, so let's close it and proceed. So I think we are changing the mentality to being reactive to an incident and trying to understand what happened, and then, of course, let's say, work with the damages, to having information in real time, and we can prevent those damages to be taken to, let's say, passengers or personnel. Another point is how artificial intelligence can, let's say, help operations. So we have a couple of projects already with counting people, with attendance, let's say, which means that with cameras, we can understand the occupancy of a specific vehicle, can be a bus, can be a train. And based on that and on GPS coordinates, we can extract the data and provide that information to the operations, saying the train is fully loaded in this particular section. So perhaps we need to reinforce the line in between station number 3 and station number 5, for example. So we can have those data in real time. The same for the buses. So these kind of things can be applied with security cameras. So we are using one device, not only to secure the passengers and the train itself, but also to provide data to the operation so they can adapt, or at least it's another source of information so they can adapt their operation. That's all, David.
Thanks, Andre. And Brad, I suppose, just to come to you in terms of any barriers you see for the adoption of technology in the organisation.
Well, no, I agree with the other two panelists. So yeah, Martin, spot on in it. The barrier is even the perception of the barrier, I think. So listening to Andrew, your response, I think it's the perception of the barrier there around the it's assisting and not replacing. And I want to draw out actually Ian's point in the live chat. The UK railway is one of the safest in the world, and that's because we are heavily regulated for a good reason. So that has to keep up with the how quickly technology is advancing, and it goes through quite a significant safety validation. And Ian's point is spot on, that is going to be a potential blocker if it doesn't keep up with the rate of the technology.
Yeah, thanks for drawing that. I was going to draw out the same point on the chat around standards. I think a couple of people have made the point, and it comes back to I think one of the points that Martin made much earlier in the conversation was that if in the event that something does go wrong, who's to blame? I presume it will be quite difficult if not developing standards, at least developing safety methods and codes of practice, as Ian mentioned, in order to keep up with technology. How hard do you think that's going to be? Are the two, if you pardon the pun, are the two on different tracks at an order of magnitude, or can standards keep a pace with the technology?
Standards will not keep pace to the technology. I think historically we need to acknowledge that and learn lessons of how quick technology has advanced just from 20 years ago to today, and it's only just going to be an upward curve. So yeah, we need to push the standards and the code of practices as quick as possible, but not at the detriment of safety. They take time for reasons to ask these difficult questions and make sure that we've covered off everything. Yeah,
agreed. Unbelievably, we're already up against our up against our hour. It's been a fascinating conversation. I suppose I'll open the floor now. Are there any questions I haven't asked, or points that people wanted to make or draw out of such a fascinating and wide-ranging topic? Feel free to speak now or forever hold your peace. Brad, anything from you?
Yeah, I mean, very quickly, we've talked a lot about video AI, but language AI as well. So, I mean, learning from our incidents, as you imagine, when we have a big incident, we undertake a really thorough investigation and embed that learning into the organisation. But we have hundreds of thousands across the industry, minor incidents, close calls, if you will, or less impacting irregularities. All of those investigations are done, but how well we learn holistically across that, it takes an individual. So somebody in my team has read hundreds of investigations to try and draw all of the themes for a safety improvement plan going forward, learning from our history. But language AI, you would be able to hopefully import all of that, and that would help us learn as an organisation or what to learn from the past to improve the future.
Yeah, fascinating. Thanks, Brad. Martin, was there anything you wanted to conclude with?
No, strangely, I was going to mention audio transcription, but I think Brad's done a great job.
And Andre, anything you wanted to close with?
No, I think that we covered everything. I think that we have let's say a long path to run regarding certifications, regarding the unified, let's say, certifications for railway in a way that we can keep the systems not proprietary but open as well. One of the things that we've seen that tenders usually came with old technology, so we need to also update consultants for the new technology. So we see a lot of tenders and tenders that were launched during the last year with technology from, let's say, the beginning of the century, right? So it's we know that sometimes consultants are not aware of the latest technology, but we need to do an effort on that to update them with the most recent technology, and how can we benefit with that.
Yeah. Thanks, Andre. I suppose just in conclusion, thanks everybody, particularly on the panel for giving their time for the last hour. Thanks for all the people who have listened in. Hope you found it enjoyable, insightful, interesting, challenging, provocative in equal measure. I've done my best to keep up with the questions. Thank you very much for everybody being so engaged. I've tried my best, probably failed to get around most or all of the themes that you were trying to draw out, if not all of the questions in specifically. And on that note, thanks everybody very much, and look forward to continuing the debate, no doubt, over the coming years.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks everybody.